Yeah. It's Movie Time is produced by John DeSando. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Kevin Carr.
And this is It's Movie Time. Oh.
I don't remember the rest of the song.
But that sounded like the opening of yesterday.
Did it? I've never heard it.
Well,
I'm unfamiliar with this musical group called the Beatles that you mentioned off the air.
All right, there's a new film with the title Yesterday.
That's
and
right.
It's based on at least 17 covers of the of the Beatles. Good Lord, what they must have paid to get those on the film.
Oh, sure. Well, and as I understand it, the surviving members of the Beatles, Ringo and Paul, signed off on the film. They said it was they were happy with it. They were okay with it.
Yeah.
So.
And anyway, the conceit of the film is pretty cool.
Yes.
Right? It's some kind of a 12-second blip in the world leaves only one guy.
Yep.
Jack, played by Amish Patel.
Yes. Newcomer.
A newcomer, yeah, and to sing the songs that he remembers of the Beatles and nobody else remembers. They don't even know who the heck this group is.
Yeah, it's a pretty high concept piece.
It is.
And it's basically put together and presented like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, very good.
Because they don't explain any of it. They don't spend any time saying, well, this is what happened and there was somebody doing a scientific experiment down at this college. No, they just... There's this blackout, and when he wakes up, he's the only one who remembers the Beatles. And he's already a struggling singer-songwriter. So he decides to use those songs, and, guess what? They're wonderful songs. And people take notice. And that's basically the jumping-off point for this. So what would you do if the Beatles never existed, but you knew their music?
Listen, what if Shakespeare was never remembered?
Yeah, and I think there was a Twilight Zone episode to that effect.
Is that right?
Yeah, so it's been something that has been played around with before, and that's I think part of the charm of the film is that it's an absurd out there concept that's strange, but by presenting it and then just running with the ball, you end up with a really interesting premise and a really interesting movie that goes places that you don't normally see a movie go.
I'll tell you, Kev, the concept is absurd, but the revelation of how much we have been influenced by the Beatles, how much music has been influenced by them, is one of the byproducts of this film that I find make it really substantial. When he plays, stripped down, plays Yesterday, Let It Be, or whatever, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
With none of the accompaniment, with none of the three others to back him up, he's playing it by himself, and by gosh, Kevin, I have to admit it, a little bit of tear in my eye.
There's some good covers, and the other thing that's interesting about it is it shows. I think it has a lot to say about art today, and if you want to talk about music, because part of the character struggle you see him with, you see him struggling with the fame and the girl he left behind, but you also see him struggling with the guilt, and that's the thing that I found so amazing is how much artistic guilt the character has, because you're a musical genius, and he's kind of like, no, really, I'm not, and he can't stop doing it.
Yes,
he's addicted to it, and you also wonder, he's feeling guilty because he's passing off something that's not his as his own, but there's also a compulsion to get it out there because you want these songs should be heard, and in a certain way he's also the conduit for the world to hear these songs for the first time. But he and this is I think a very low level of this. There's no planning to this. He just throws them out there, and in a short few months, he does more than the Beatles did, because the Beatles took decades to write these songs and went through different periods of their careers, and he's just sort of puking them all out over the course of a couple months from different eras in their life, which kind of doesn't quite ring true to the people in the know.
And you bring up one of the issues for me, which is that there's not enough guilt. I don't think that part of it is explored fully enough.
Okay.
Now, as you said, he throws it out there, gets fame and fortune, and only toward the end do I think they fully address the plagiarism issue here.
Yeah.
So anyway,
You're right.
I was
They do resolve it, or not resolve it, but they address it. That's why I liked it, because they throw it in there underlying as a subtext.
Yes.
And then they come back to it, and that's I think why I like. But you didn't think it did enough.
Not enough, right? Because I thought it was a really important issue.
Yeah.
Plagiarizing. We've had a number of court cases over that kind of thing.
Yeah, especially this day and age with the Beatles' music themselves.
And the other side of the film that I found, well, maybe a little off-putting, was the romance.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Is that?
There's something. Lily James plays
Yes.
his manager from back in Suffolk when he was struggling, and he's the one he leaves behind. And Lily James is adorable and sweet and beautiful, and
Yep.
honestly, I think that she's never directed quite properly. I think people just say, "Oh, she's adorable, sweet, and beautiful."
Right.
That's all she needs. She doesn't need any sort of character development.
Yep.
And I felt her character was incredibly shallow.
Yes.
And very underdeveloped, in which seems to be something that does plague movies going back years. Is the female characters are substandard in this.
Right.
There's a lot of depth to the male characters in this, but even like you look at like Kate McKinnon,
I was going to mention her. Yeah.
she's a jarring force in this, and I think part of that's because Kate McKinnon. I know I'm going to step on toes here, but I don't think she's a good actress. I think
She just blows it out.
she's good at doing the Saturday Night
Yes.
Live sketch comedy.
Yes. She's being a capital B.
Yeah, well, and just sort of like being a caricature.
Right. Yeah,
I
right.
don't think I've ever seen her do any sort of real acting, and that's
I know, and she is really a caricature.
yeah.
But Kevin, and what is it worth seeing? Something like this, redoing Beatles songs. I mean, is this a film worth seeing after we've had *Star Is Born*, *Bohemian Rhapsody*, *Rocket Man*?
Well, I think if you look at Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man specifically, kind of setting *Star Is
Yes.
Born* aside, those are two movies that are about the music. Arguably, Bohemian Rhapsody is more about the music than it is about Queen, because they take such liberties with the actual biography structure to it, but they all sit in that framework of a biopic. This one's just as much about the music, more about the music than the Beatles, but it's told in a very different way, and I think that that's kind of enlightening, because it is a celebration of the music, just as Rocket Man and Bohemian Rhapsody were, but it's not shackled by a musician biopic hitting all the same notes that we're used to seeing.
Right, and in that way, the thing that I fully appreciate is relooking at the Beatles in a completely different way, and realizing that regardless of how you do it, if you honor that music, it's like no other.
Yeah.
Really.
And I mean, yeah, it's one of these things that it'll make you appreciate the music for what it means to American culture and world culture, really. I mean,
Yes,
British culture,
yes.
but world culture, and also just the profound impact. Because the other thing is if you deep dive into this, the entire story unravels, because there are so many musicians now, 50, 60 years later, that have been influenced by the Beatles,
Yes.
that wouldn't have been around, and I think that's one of the things. Danny Boyle, who directs it, is a brilliant director, and I think he dances around those potential potholes incredibly well.
Well, Kevin Carr, the film is Yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
What grade would you award it?
I am going to award it an A.
Oh, very good. And I'm going to award it a B+,
Okay,
which means we have a real winner here.
that's right.
But how can you go wrong with the Beatles? I wonder. Kevin.
I still don't remember the song.